there's no question that the first years after 9/11, through 2004, even 2005, saw an extraordinary expansion of executive power, or at least extraordinary claims of executive power, such that we'd never seen before. Most remarkably, probably in the torture context, in which you had a memo prepared by the Department of Justice saying that it would be unconstitutional for Congress to criminalize torture if it were applying that law against the president acting as commander-in-chief in an interrogation setting. And that was really an extraordinary claim. I think to the extent there's any silver lining of that said, and it wasn't just torture, it was in detention, it was in trial, it was in surveillance, the extent there's ever any silver lining in that set of policies, it's that we saw maybe an unprecedented effort by the courts to push back against it. So you had the courts stepping in 2004, again in 2006, again in 2008. And in each instance, conventional wisdom had it, particularly back in 2004, that the courts wouldn't even take these cases. The Supreme Court wouldn't touch the question of whether or not the president could detain an American citizen as an enemy combatant. The court wouldn't touch the question of whether it had jurisdiction over what was going on at Guantanamo Bay. And for all the subsequent criticism that there's been of the court's decisions not going far enough to constrain the executive, I think it's important to, at least in historical perspective, understand that it was remarkable for the courts to engage at all at that time. So I'd like to think, and the jury's still out in some respects, but I'd like to think that what we've seen is both an effort to expand executive power and then some efforts by the courts, some modest efforts by Congress, and as rather great effort by civil society, the press, non-governmental organizations, and so forth, to push back against those efforts to expand executive power.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that. But beyond thinking about the impact on our law, I guess we must also remember the great loss of human life on that day.
I was thinking about it actually just the other day. I just started a new job in Manhattan, in the Village, and as I was looking out at my new law students, most of whom are 23 years old or so, I was thinking that many of them come from Manhattan. 10 years ago, they were 13. They've spent half their lives growing up in a post-9/11 world, and the people we lost on that day were people they knew when they were children and are only now coming to think of as they become adults. As much as I think the changes in law and the continuing debates about that are important, it made me think about the need to remind them and remind each of my students every year about where we were when this started, and who those people were who we lost on that day. I think losing touch with that will be the greatest tragedy that we face if we can't keep those people in mind.
Okay. Professor Pearlstein, thank you so much for talking with ACSblog.
My pleasure.